Marcus Hayes stood outside the frosted glass door at 5:47 on a Monday morning, toolkit in one hand, the other hovering near the handle. 23 stories separated this world from the basement maintenance shop where he'd spent 3 years fixing pipes and rewiring junction boxes for people who never learned his name. Up here, even the air felt expensive, recycled through systems that cost more than his annual salary, scented with something subtle that probably had a French name. His radio crackled. Frank Morrison's voice cut through the pre-dawn quiet. "You there yet?" Marcus pressed the button. "Just outside the CEO's wing. Make it fast. Email had urgent in all caps 3 times. You know what that means with Sterling." He did. Kate Sterling. 28 years old, running a $2.8 billion technology company her father built over 4 decades. The woman terrified half the building just by existing. Marcus had seen her exactly once 6 months ago in the lobby during the quarterly all-hands meeting. Charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, heels clicking precision into marble, face carved from something harder than stone. She'd walked through a crowd of employees like Moses parting water, and someone near him had whispered, "The Ice Queen doesn't give second chances." Marcus had kept his head down and prayed she'd never notice him. Now he was about to walk into her private office at dawn. The circuit breaker panel was easy enough to locate, tripped main probably from overnight storms that had rattled his apartment windows and made Lily cry out in her sleep. Marcus reset it methodically, heard electricity hum back through the walls like a waking giant. Lights flickered on throughout the executive wing, each one a small victory. He worked with the muscle memory of 14 years, keeping things running, keeping Lily fed, keeping their heads barely above water. 14 years since Jessica told him she wasn't ready to be a mother and walked out 3 days before their daughter drew first breath. 14 years of night classes, abandoned engineering dreams packed into boxes he couldn't afford to store, every choice narrowing his world until it became a tunnel, with only one purpose: keeping his daughter safe. Every decision since that positive pregnancy test had led here to this moment, to being invisible in a building full of people who'd never drown, because they'd never have to swim. The frosted glass door showed as a darker rectangle in the hallway. One more switch to test the master control for the private office suite. Marcus flipped it, heard the satisfying click of response, and reached for the handle without thinking. 3 years of maintenance work meant opening doors, checking systems, verifying function. Pure reflex born from thousands of similar moments. His hand pushed. The door swung inward. Time performed surgery on itself, each second stretching into separate moments of crystalline horror. Kate Sterling stood in the center of her office, pulling a cream blouse from a dry cleaning garment bag. She wore a black pencil skirt and a white lace bra. Nothing else. Auburn hair fell loose across bare shoulders, catching the early light from floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's waking skyline. Her dark eyes went wide with shock that perfectly mirrored the explosion happening in Marcus's chest. The toolkit hit the floor. Tools scattered across expensive hardwood with sounds like breaking bones. Screwdrivers, wire strippers, voltage testers spreading in an accusatory arc. Words tumbled out, desperate and clumsy, tripping over each other in their panic to escape. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Testing lights. I have a daughter. Please don't fire me." Kate Sterling's voice could have frozen liquid nitrogen. "Turn around." Marcus spun so fast his vision blurred, facing the frosted glass and the hallway beyond, that suddenly felt like freedom he'd just lost forever. Behind him came the whisper of fabric, the sharp zip of the garment bag. The small sounds of dignity being rebuilt. Every muscle in his body locked rigid. 3 years of invisible work of being dependable and competent, and exactly what they needed destroyed in 5 seconds of catastrophic stupidity. She'd call security. She'd call HR. She'd make absolutely certain he never worked in Seattle again. Word would spread, the maintenance guy who violated the CEO's privacy, who couldn't be trusted with access. And Lily would pay the price for his mistake. Always it was Lily who paid. "I swear I didn't see anything, just doing my job testing circuits. Didn't know you were here, please. Lily needs I need this job. Be quiet. His jaw snapped shut. He could hear his own breathing, ragged and panicked, too loud in the terrible silence. Could hear Kate dressing in the space behind him. Could hear his career ending with each second that passed. When she finally spoke again, something in her tone made him pause. Not rage. Something more complex, more calculated. What's your name? Marcus Hayes. Ma'am. Maintenance staff. Electrical clearance. 3 years employed. No complaints. Perfect record. This was an accident. I thought the office was empty. I heard you the first time. A pause that lasted centuries. Turn around. Marcus turned slowly, eyes fixed on the floor like a child awaiting punishment. Kate stood behind her massive desk, now fully dressed in the cream blouse and black skirt. Hair pulled back in the severe style he recognized from that lobby glimpse 6 months ago. Every trace of vulnerability erased like it had never existed. But her dark eyes studied him with an intensity that made his skin prickle, assessing him with the same focus she probably brought to quarterly reports and acquisition strategies. Look at me. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Meeting Kate Sterling's gaze felt like staring into a searchlight, but he forced himself. She deserved that much acknowledgement of what he'd done. Acceptance of the judgment about to fall. Her face was unreadable, a mask of perfect control refined through years of boardroom warfare. But something flickered in those dark eyes as she looked at him. Not anger exactly. Something more complicated, like she was solving an equation he couldn't see. You really didn't know I was here. Not a question, a statement. But Marcus answered anyway, the truth spilling out because he had nothing left to lose. No, ma'am. Work order just said electrical malfunction, executive floor urgent. I reset the breaker-tested switches. Thought the whole floor was empty this early. 5:47 in the morning, nobody's supposed to be here except security. Kate walked around her desk with measured steps, each one deliberate. She stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made the air between them feel charged with invisible electricity. You're terrified. Yes, ma'am. Of me or of losing your job? Both. The truth fell out before he could stop it. Mostly losing the job. Lily's 6, first grade. I'm all she has. Single father. I can't afford. His voice cracked. He forced himself to breathe, to not completely fall apart in front of this woman who held his entire future in her perfectly manicured hands. Can't afford to lose this. Something shifted in Kate's expression, a flicker of recognition passing across her face like cloud shadow on water. She studied him for another long moment, and Marcus felt catalogued, assessed, measured against criteria he couldn't begin to understand. He saw her eyes taking in details, his worn work boots, the frayed edge of his shirt collar. The exhaustion probably written in every line of his face from another night of 3 hours sleep between Lily's nightmare and his early shift. The door was unlocked. She said it flatly, like reading from a technical manual. I should have secured it when I arrived. That's on me, not you. Marcus blinked, certain he'd heard wrong. His brain couldn't process what she was saying because it violated every expectation of how this scene should end. Kate turned away, moving back to her desk with the same controlled grace. What you saw stays between us. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I would never say anything to anyone about anything. I swear on my daughter's life. Good. She picked up a tablet from her desk, attention already shifting to whatever waited in her schedule. The incident apparently filed away and closed. Finish your testing. Send your supervisor a report that everything's functioning normally. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, unable to process what was happening. He'd braced for disaster, for his world collapsing, and instead found something he didn't have a name for. Mercy, maybe, or calculation, or something else entirely that he was too rattled to identify. Ma'am. The word came out before he could stop it. Kate looked up from her tablet, and for just a second, one unguarded moment, her mask slipped. What he saw underneath wasn't anger or ice, it was exhaustion, The kind of bone-deep weariness that recognizes itself in another person, that sees the weight someone else carries because you're carrying something just as heavy. I really am sorry. I know you are. Her voice was quiet now, almost gentle, and somehow that was more unsettling than her earlier frost. Now go! Marcus grabbed his toolkit and fled, tools rattling against each other as he shoved them back into the bag with shaking hands. His legs were unsteady as he escaped from the office, as he tested the remaining switches with trembling fingers, as he documented everything on his phone, because that was the job, that was what he did, that was all he knew how to do. He made it to the elevator before his knees gave out, leaned against cool metal walls, heart still racing, trying to understand what had just happened. She'd let him go. She'd seen his terror, heard his desperation about Lily, and chosen mercy over the punishment he absolutely deserved. Why? The question followed him down 23 floors, through the morning's remaining work orders, through the mechanical routine of fixing broken things, while his mind spun in useless circles. He picked Lily up from school at 3. Listened to her excited chatter about the butterfly life cycle they were learning, and could she please have a caterpillar, and she promised to take care of it forever and ever. He helped with math homework while heating jarred pasta sauce for dinner because fresh groceries would have to wait until Friday's paycheck. Normal things, safe things. The rhythm of their life together that he'd almost destroyed in 5 seconds. But late that night, lying awake in his cramped apartment while Lily breathed softly in the next room, Marcus couldn't stop seeing Kate Sterling's face in that moment when her mask slipped. Couldn't stop hearing the quiet acknowledgement in her voice when she'd said, "I know you are." Like she understood. Like maybe she carried her own weight that nobody else could see. 2 days passed. Marcus reported for his shifts, kept his head down even lower than usual, tried to convince himself the incident was behind him. The executive floor might as well be on another planet. He had no reason to go back up there. He fixed a leaking pipe in the 4th floor bathroom, replaced burned-out fluorescent tubes in the 2nd floor conference room, unclogged a drain in the cafeteria that made him question humanity's relationship with food. Invisible work for invisible people. His natural habitat. Then Thursday afternoon, his phone buzzed with an email notification that made his stomach drop through the floor. Marcus Hayes, please report to Human Resources immediately, 4th floor, suite 400. This was it. They'd decided to fire him after all. Probably wanted to do it officially with paperwork and witnesses, a formal termination to protect the company from any potential lawsuit. Should have known the reprieve was temporary. Should have known mercy from someone like Kate Sterling had an expiration date stamped on it. The HR suite was designed to make difficult conversations slightly less awful, which somehow made them worse. Neutral colors that meant nothing, uncomfortable furniture that discouraged lingering air that smelled faintly of stress and broken careers. The receptionist barely looked up when Marcus gave his name. Just gestured toward a conference room where a woman in a gray suit waited with a manila folder that probably contained his professional death certificate. Patricia Kemp, HR Director. Mid-50s, sharp-eyed, professionally sympathetic in ways that meant absolutely nothing because sympathy didn't pay rent or feed children. Marcus Hayes, please sit down. Marcus sat, hands gripping his knees to hide the trembling he couldn't quite control. If this is about Monday morning, I can explain. Patricia opened the folder with practiced efficiency. This isn't disciplinary, Mr. Hayes. The words didn't make sense. Marcus stared at the papers she slid across the table, trying to force his brain to process what he was seeing. But the letters seemed to rearrange themselves into incomprehensible patterns. This is a position transfer. Patricia's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing printer maintenance. Effective immediately, you're being reassigned from general maintenance to executive support technician for the executive floor. It's a permanent position with significant salary increase and enhanced benefits package. Marcus's vision blurred. The numbers on the page swam. $68,000 annually. Up from 38. Health insurance that covered dependents, including dental and vision for Lily. paid time off that actually accumulated instead of being theoretical. Retirement contributions he could maybe someday actually use. I don't understand. The position was created based on a recommendation from Ms. Sterling herself. Patricia consulted her notes with professional precision. She indicated that the executive floor requires dedicated technical support with electrical expertise and, she paused, choosing her next words carefully, demonstrated discretion and reliability under pressure. The room tilted slightly on its axis. Marcus gripped the table edge to keep from sliding off the world. Ms. Sterling recommended me. That's correct. The salary adjustment is detailed on page 2. You'll also receive health insurance covering your daughter, which I understand from your file is particularly relevant to your situation. Patricia's professional demeanor softened slightly, a crack in the HR armor. This is a good opportunity, Mr. Hayes. The executive floor position comes with better hours, better benefits, direct exposure to company leadership. If you perform well, it could open doors to other advancement opportunities. Doors. The word felt foreign, like something from a language he'd stopped speaking years ago. Marcus looked down at the numbers again, forcing them to become real. This salary meant paying rent on time every month, meant finally fixing the leaking faucet in their bathroom, meant buying Lily new shoes instead of praying the old ones lasted another season, meant breathing room maybe for the first time in 6 years. But why had Kate Sterling done this? He'd walked in on her at her most vulnerable, seen her stripped of the armor she wore to face the world. By every logical calculation, she should want him as far away as possible, not promoted into her immediate orbit. Unless, and this felt dangerous to consider, unless she'd seen something in his desperation about Lily that had touched something in her own carefully controlled world. Or maybe she was buying his sons in, ensuring his loyalty through gratitude and financial dependence. Or maybe she was testing him again in some way he hadn't figured out yet. Do you accept the position or not, Mr. Hayes? What choice did he have? What choice had he ever had? Yes, I accept. The paperwork took 40 minutes and felt like signing his life away in a different language. Patricia explained his new responsibilities with the systematic efficiency of someone who'd delivered this speech 1,000 times, maintaining all systems on the executive floor, responding to immediate technical needs, conducting preventive maintenance work, being available for issues that arose. He'd still report to Frank Morrison technically, but his primary location would be the 23rd floor, where Kate Sterling worked, where he'd be in proximity to the woman who terrified and confused him in equal measure. You start Monday morning. Patricia handed him a new security badge with Executive Support Services printed beneath his name in official lettering. Report to the executive reception desk at 7 a.m. Ms. Sterling's assistant will brief you on protocols and expectations for working in that environment. Marcus took the badge with numb fingers. His reflection stared back at him from the laminated surface. Same face, same exhaustion, but somehow already different, already marked as someone who belonged in a world he didn't understand. That night, after Lily was finally asleep following her usual bedtime negotiation tactics in 3 stories instead of the agreed-upon 2, Marcus sat at their tiny kitchen table and studied the paperwork by the light of a lamp he'd repaired 6 times. The salary increase alone changed everything, but the question burned in his mind, refusing to be extinguished by pragmatic gratitude. Why, his first theory was the obvious one: she was buying his silence. Kate Sterling needed someone who'd proven capable of keeping his mouth shut when it mattered most. Someone who understood that discretion was worth more than gossip. The walk-in incident had been a test, and he'd passed by, not running straight to his co-workers with a story that would have spread through the building like wildfire. Or maybe, and this felt more dangerous to consider, maybe she'd seen something in his desperation that resonated with her own hidden truths. That flash of recognition when he'd begged for his job, the mention of Lily, the visible evidence that he was holding his life together with desperation and duct tape and not much else. Maybe that had touched something in the Ice Queen's carefully controlled world, reminded her that under the armor she was also human, also vulnerable, also carrying weight no one else could see. Either way, Monday morning would come with the weight of inevitability, with it a new life on the executive floor. Working in daily proximity to a woman who terrified him, confused him, and had shown him mercy he still didn't understand. The old fluorescent light in their bathroom finally died completely that night, surrendering to 6 years of overuse. But for once, Marcus didn't see it as another failure, another thing breaking that he couldn't afford to replace. He saw it as a sign that something was ending, and something else, something he couldn't yet name but could feel gathering like a storm on the horizon, was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability that comes from knowing your life is about to change and being powerless to stop it. Marcus stood outside Sterling Technologies Tower at 6:45, watching his reflection waver in the glass facade like a ghost uncertain of its own existence. The new badge felt heavy in his pocket, a physical reminder that he was crossing a boundary he'd never imagined crossing. He'd dropped Lily at school early, endured her questions about why he looked so nervous. Promised they'd celebrate his new position with pizza Friday night if she finished all her homework without complaining. She'd hugged him extra tight before running to join her friends, and that warmth was the only thing keeping him from turning around and walking away from whatever waited above. The executive floor at 7 o'clock hummed with controlled energy, fundamentally different from the silent space he'd encountered during the emergency call. Assistants moved with purpose, arranging schedules with military precision. Junior executives clutched coffee like lifelines, faces already tight with the stress of expectations they'd probably never meet. The soft ping of elevator arrivals delivered the day's first wave of ambition and anxiety in carefully tailored packages. Marcus felt immediately catastrophically out of place. A maintenance worker in navy blue utility pants, surrounded by tailored suits and clicking heels. By people who belonged in this rarefied air while he was just visiting on borrowed time. The reception desk curved along one wall like a spaceship console, all blonde wood and embedded screens displaying information he couldn't begin to parse. The woman behind it looked up as he approached, her smile professional, but not unkind, the practiced warmth of someone whose job was managing the interface between chaos and order. Marcus Hayes. I'm supposed to report here for executive support services. Yes, we've been expecting you. She tapped something on her screen with manicured efficiency. I'm Jennifer. You'll be working primarily with me for coordination and scheduling. Ms. Sterling's executive assistant, Amanda Price, will brief you on protocols for working directly with senior leadership. She's just finishing the morning briefing but should be available shortly. Jennifer gestured toward a seating area that looked like it belonged in an art gallery, complete with abstract sculptures Marcus suspected were worth more than his car. He perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent toolkit, resting between his boots like a security blanket, and watched the executive floor perform its choreographed dance. Around him, the machinery of corporate power moved with frightening efficiency. People moved with purpose, every gesture economical. Conversations happened in low tones, suggesting everything discussed was confidential and crucial. Through glass walls, he caught glimpses of conference rooms where early meetings were already underway, offices where senior executives stared at multiple screens displaying what he assumed was very important information about very important things. And somewhere beyond it all, behind doors he couldn't see, Kate Sterling was beginning her day, preparing to face whatever challenges a 28-year-old woman running a multi-billion-dollar company faced on a random Monday morning. Marcus wondered if she ever thought about that moment in her office, or if it had already been filed away in whatever mental compartment she used for things that didn't matter. Mr. Hayes! Marcus stood quickly, nearly knocking over his toolkit in his haste. The woman who'd spoken was mid-40s, impeccably dressed in charcoal gray that probably had a designer label, with eyes that assessed him in a single glance and filed away everything relevant. I'm Amanda Price, Ms. Sterling's executive assistant. Follow me, please. She moved like someone who'd learned to navigate these hallways in her sleep heels, making almost no sound on marble despite her pace. Marcus followed, acutely aware of how his work boots sounded by comparison too loud, too heavy, too obvious. They passed through the main executive area into a corridor he recognized from the emergency call, and his pulse quickened despite his best efforts at control. The path to Kate's private wing. Amanda led him to a small office he hadn't noticed during his first visit, tucked discreetly near the electrical panel room. Modest by executive floor standards, but palatial compared to the basement break room where he usually left his things. A real desk, comfortable chair, built-in cabinets for equipment storage, and a window, an actual window that showed the city below, instead of concrete walls and fluorescent lights. "This is your workspace." Amanda's voice was brisk but not unkind. "You'll maintain all systems on this floor with priority given to Ms. Sterling's immediate area. Response time for her direct requests is 10 minutes maximum. All other issues should be resolved within the hour unless they require parts or outside contractors, in which case you coordinate with me first." She handed him a tablet that looked brand new, probably more advanced than anything he'd ever touched. "This links to the building management system. You'll receive all work orders here along with Ms. Sterling's schedule so you can plan maintenance around her meetings and commitments. That schedule is confidential, Mr. Hayes. You don't discuss it with anyone, not other maintenance staff, not your friends, not random strangers at coffee shops. Is that understood?" "Understood completely." "Good." Amanda's expression suggested she was used to giving this kind of briefing, used to managing people who needed to understand the rules of a world they hadn't been born into. "Ms. Sterling values 3 things above all else: discretion, efficiency, and invisibility. Your work should be seamless. She shouldn't have to think about whether the lights work or if the temperature is comfortable or if the technology will function when she needs it. If she notices you at all, it should be because you've solved a problem before it became her problem. Clear?" The irony of being told to be invisible by the woman whose boss had personally promoted him after he'd accidentally seen her half-dressed wasn't lost on Marcus. He kept his expression neutral and nodded with what he hoped looked like professional competence. Questions, 1,000 of them, none he could actually voice. "No, ma'am." "Good. There's a staff briefing every morning at 6:45 in the main conference room. You're expected to attend. It covers the day's schedule, any VIP visits that might affect your work, and security considerations. Start your systems check at 7:30. Ms. Sterling typically arrives between 8 and 8:30, and everything should be perfect before she walks through that door." "Not functioning perfect, is that clear?" "Crystal clear." Amanda paused, and something in her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a crack in the professional facade revealing something more human underneath. "Ms. Sterling doesn't make recommendations lightly, Mr. Hayes. She saw something in you that made her believe you belong up here. I suggest you prove her right." Before Marcus could respond, before he could ask what exactly Kate had said or why she'd really promoted him, Amanda was gone. Her departure as efficient as everything else about her, leaving him alone in his new office, surrounded by trappings of a life he'd never imagined living. The first week passed in a blur of learning protocols and staying invisible. Marcus memorized the building management system with the same focus he'd once brought to engineering textbooks. Familiarized himself with every circuit breaker and HVAC control, discovered that the executive floor had more sophisticated technology packed into a single level than the rest of the building combined. Smart glass that adjusted for light levels automatically. Climate controls that responded to occupancy sensors. Conference room systems that cost more than luxury cars and required a manual the size of a phone book. He attended the morning briefings and learned to decode Amanda's careful language describing Kate's schedule. "Ms. Sterling requires uninterrupted focus time" meant keep the entire wing silent. No maintenance work unless it was literally an emergency. Board members visiting from New York meant everything needed to be perfect to the point of obsession because reputation was on the line. Press conference in the main auditorium meant Kate would be on edge all day, standards impossibly high, no margin for error. And through it all, Marcus caught only glimpses of her. A flash of auburn hair as she strode past, moving with purpose towards some meeting that was probably crucial to the company's survival. her voice carrying through a conference room door crisp with authority as she dismantled someone's proposal. Once he was replacing a malfunctioning light fixture in the hallway when she emerged from a meeting and their eyes met for half a second before she looked away and continued walking like he was just another piece of furniture. She gave no sign of recognition whatsoever. No acknowledgement that he existed beyond his function as the person who kept her world running smoothly. It should have been a relief proof that she'd truly moved past the incident that they could maintain professional distance. Instead, it felt like standing in a room where all the air had been sucked out, leaving nothing but vacuum and the sound of his own heartbeat. Marcus told himself it was better this way. Professional, clean, appropriate. He was here to do a job, collect a paycheck that was transforming Lily's life, maintain the discretion Kate valued so highly. That moment in her office when he'd seen vulnerability crack through her armor was an aberration. A mistake they were both pretending never happened. But late at night, lying awake in his apartment that suddenly felt less cramped thanks to breathing room in his budget, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the question that had haunted him since he signed the transfer papers. Why had she really promoted him? What did she see, and why did her studied indifference hurt more than it should? The answer came on his 8th day in a moment that redefined everything he thought he understood about Kate Sterling and his place in her carefully controlled world. It was late Thursday afternoon, almost 6 o'clock. The executive floor was emptying as people departed for dinner meetings or headed home to families and lives that existed beyond these walls. Marcus was in conference room B testing a video conferencing system that had glitched during a presentation that morning, causing 30 seconds of frozen screens and garbled audio. Minor by normal standards, catastrophic by executive floor standards, where perfection was the minimum acceptable baseline. The technology was sophisticated enough that the manual read like a foreign language. But Marcus had spent 2 hours systematically breaking down each component until he found the faulty processor buried in a nest of cables. He was on his back under the conference table, rewiring connections with the focused attention that had gotten him through 14 years of keeping things running, when he heard voices approaching down the corridor. Kate's voice cut through the air like a blade honed on stone. "I don't care what the legal team says about liability exposure. We're not settling this case." A male voice, older and carrying the weight of assumed authority, tried for reason tinged with condescension. "Kate, the optics alone of going to trial. The optics of backing down are worse, Robert." Kate's footsteps grew closer, each one deliberate. "We set a precedent here. Every executive we've ever signed to a non-compete walks away thinking they can steal our client lists, and we'll just negotiate a settlement like it's a parking ticket." They entered the room. Marcus froze under the table, barely breathing. He could see expensive shoes, Kate's black heels he'd recognize anywhere by now. A man's polished Oxfords that probably cost 4 figures. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. "You're being unreasonably aggressive about this, and it's clouding your judgment." The man's voice carried condescension wrapped in false concern. "Marshall was your father's hire, one of his most trusted people. Going after him publicly damages Harrison's legacy in ways you clearly haven't considered. My father's legacy is secured by this company's continued success, not by protecting executives who betray us." Kate's voice turned to ice. "Or are you suggesting I should prioritize sentiment over strategy, Robert, because that seems like terrible advice from a board member?" "Robert." Marcus recognized the voice now. Robert Chambers, one of the senior board members. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suits that projected power and entitlement in equal measure. "I'm suggesting you remember that some of us have been with this company since before you were born, since your father was building this empire from nothing." Robert's tone carried threat disguised as mentorship. "Your father trusted Marshall implicitly. Perhaps you should consider whether your judgment in this matter—" "My judgment has increased this company's value by 42% in 2 years. Kate interrupted with precision. "My judgment acquired Techline and Meridian when everyone on this board said we were overextending and would destroy shareholder value. My judgment—" She stopped abruptly. Silence stretched for 3 beats of Marcus's racing heart. "Is someone else in here?" Marcus's blood turned to ice water. He'd been so still, barely breathing, trying to become invisible through sheer force of will. But somehow she'd sensed him, some sixth sense developed from years of boardroom warfare telling her the room wasn't as private as it appeared. Robert's voice carried disdain thick enough to choke on. "The maintenance technician, I believe. Perhaps you should have him escorted out before we continue discussing confidential strategic matters." More silence. Marcus could feel Kate's eyes searching through. She couldn't see him under the table. The weight of her attention was almost physical. "Hayes." Not a question, a statement of fact. Marcus slid out from under the table, toolkit in hand, face burning with embarrassment and something else he couldn't name. "I'm sorry, Ms. Sterling. I was fixing the video system. I didn't mean to intrude on a private conversation." "Did you hear our discussion?" Robert demanded, his voice sharp with authority he clearly thought should matter. "I heard voices, yes." Marcus met Kate's eyes despite every instinct screaming at him to look away, to be invisible, to disappear. "I didn't listen to content. I was focused on the repair." It was a distinction without difference, and they all knew it. But it was also technically true. He'd heard words without processing their meaning, background noise, while his mind tracked circuit paths and connection points. Robert's expression said he expected immediate dismissal, probably followed by some kind of security escort and a reminder about confidentiality agreements. But Kate just studied Marcus with that same unreadable intensity he'd seen in her office. Like she was calculating equations that included variables he couldn't perceive. "Finish your work, then leave quietly." "Yes, ma'am." Marcus turned back to the video system with shaking hands, hyper-aware of the conversation continuing in low tones behind him. He worked as quickly as possible without sacrificing thoroughness, testing connections, verifying the repair, making sure it wouldn't fail again. Every second felt like an eternity. Every word spoken behind him felt like it was being recorded in some file that would eventually be used against him. When he finally packed up his tools and headed for the door, Robert was mid-sentence about shareholder concerns and market perception. Neither Kate nor Robert acknowledged Marcus's departure, as if he'd already ceased to exist in their reality. He made it to his small office and leaned against the closed door, pulse hammering in his ears. The smart thing, the only smart thing, would be to go home, forget what he'd heard, never mention it to anyone. Discretion, that's what Kate valued. The ability to be trusted with proximity to power without exploiting it. But the look in her eyes when she'd realized he was there hadn't been anger. It had been calculation, evaluation, like she was running him through some kind of test whose parameters only she understood. Marcus stayed late that night, running diagnostics on systems that didn't need checking, unable to shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, even if he couldn't articulate what. Around 8 o'clock, when the executive floor was dark and scent except for emergency lighting casting long shadows, his tablet pinged with a message from Kate Sterling's private email, sent directly to his work account. "Your discretion is noted and appreciated. KS, 7 words, no explanation, no context, but they carried weight that pressed against his chest like physical force. Marcus stared at them until his eyes blurred, trying to decode layers of meaning underneath. She'd been testing him deliberately, or she'd simply seized an opportunity when it presented itself. Either way, she'd watched him overhear a confidential conversation and choose silence over gossip, discretion over currency that could have bought him status among his co-workers. And she'd acknowledged it, directly, personally. The message felt like a door opening, or maybe a trap being set. Marcus couldn't tell which, and the uncertainty kept him awake long after he made it home, to his quiet apartment where Lily slept peacefully, unaware that her father's life was becoming more complicated by the day. The following Tuesday, Kate requested him by name for the first time since the promotion. The work order came through his tablet at 2:37 in the afternoon, marked urgent with a red flag. Temperature control malfunction in CEO office. Immediate response required. Marcus grabbed his equipment and made it to Kate's wing in under 8 minutes, well within the 10-minute mandate. Amanda intercepted him at the entrance, her expression tight with concern that made him instantly worried about what he was walking into. She's been in back-to-back video conferences for 3 hours straight. The AC cut out 40 minutes ago and the room's getting uncomfortable. Fix it quickly and quietly without disrupting her meeting if at all possible. Kate's office door was open. He could hear her voice as he approached, still crisp and controlled despite what had to be stifling heat. "I understand your concerns about the production timeline, David. What I need you to understand is that the board won't approve additional delays regardless of your engineering team's objections." Marcus slipped into the office, keeping to the perimeter, making himself as invisible as humanly possible. The temperature was indeed uncomfortable, at least 78 degrees and climbing steadily. Kate sat behind her massive desk facing a wall of screens showing various video conference participants. Her posture perfect despite the heat. She didn't acknowledge his presence with so much as a glance. But he saw her shoulders relax fractionally a minute. Change that maybe only he noticed because he was watching for it. The thermostat was mounted behind a panel that matched the wall perfectly, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Marcus opened it silently, pulled up diagnostics on his tablet, and immediately identified the problem. Failed sensor sending incorrect readings to the climate control system. Simple fix, he had a replacement in his bag, always carried extras of the most common failure points because preparedness was half the job. "We've been over this multiple times, David." Kate's voice carried controlled patience stretched to its limit. "Marketing doesn't drive the launch schedule, product readiness does. If your team can't deliver campaign materials by week 4, we'll find an agency that can." Marcus worked in absolute silence, replacing the sensor, recalibrating the system, testing response. Cool air began flowing through vents within minutes, blessed relief spreading through the room like answered prayer. He allowed himself a glance toward Kate and found her watching him in the reflection of her darkened screens. Her eyes tracked his movements even as she verbally dismantled someone's excuses with surgical precision, multitasking at a level that seemed almost superhuman. "Much better. Now that we can all think clearly again, let's discuss realistic deliverables and what actual accountability looks like." It wasn't about the temperature, not entirely. She was talking to him, acknowledging the fix without breaking focus on the meeting, thanking him in the only way she could without making it obvious to the people on her screens. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Recognition of competence between two professionals who understood their roles, who knew what it meant to be good at something, even if the world didn't always notice. He packed up his tools as quietly as he'd entered and left without a word. 10 minutes later, another message appeared on his tablet. "Efficient work, thank you." 3 days after that, she asked for him again. A malfunctioning outlet in her private conference room discovered 15 minutes before a meeting with potential investors who might fund the company's next major expansion. Marcus replaced the outlet in under 10 minutes while Kate reviewed presentation materials at the table. Her presence a constant weight in his peripheral vision that made him more careful, more thorough, more determined to get it perfect. Then again the following week. A flickering light above her desk that she said disrupted her focus during late-night work sessions when the building was empty and she was trying to prepare for crucial negotiations. A coffee maker in her private kitchen that refused to function, probably because someone had used it wrong, but Marcus didn't say that out loud. A loose door handle that caught on her sleeve and clearly annoyed her beyond all reasonable proportion. Small things, easily fixed. But each request came directly from her to him, bypassing the normal work order system. And each one felt like another layer of something being built between them, not friendship exactly, not trust in any conventional sense, but something more complicated and harder to name. Marcus began to understand the real reason she'd promoted him, and it had nothing to do with buying his silence about seeing her vulnerable. It was about reliability in its purest form. Kate Sterling had built her entire life around control, and she needed someone in her immediate environment who could solve problems efficiently without requiring management. without needing their ego stroked, without turning every small issue into an opportunity for attention or advancement. She needed someone who understood what she needed before she had to ask for it. Someone who could read the room, anticipate problems, solve them invisibly. She needed him to be exactly what he'd always been: invisible, competent, reliable. But this time she actually noticed. This time it mattered. He started anticipating issues before they became problems, noticed when temperature in her wing fluctuated slightly and adjusted it before she felt the change. Identified a pattern in the lighting system that caused a brief flicker every third day at precisely 2:15 p.m. and replaced the timer module that was causing it. Kept spare parts for every system she used regularly, stored in his office for immediate access. And slowly, incrementally, like ice melting in spring sun, the Ice Queen began to thaw in his presence. It started with simple acknowledgments. A nod when he arrived to fix something. A quiet thank you when he left, voice softer than the steel she used with everyone else. Then actual words beyond professional courtesy. Small conversations that felt like cracks forming in a carefully maintained dam. "You're here early." It was Monday morning, 7:15. Marcus was on a ladder replacing a faulty smoke detector above the entrance to her private wing, determined to finish before her 8:30 investor meeting. "Wanted to complete this before your 8:30 with the Meridian people, ma'am." He kept his tone neutral, professional, appropriate for the boundary between them. "Amanda mentioned it in the morning briefing. You read the briefings carefully. Not a question." But he heard approval underneath, recognition that he was doing more than the minimum, that he cared about the work beyond just collecting a paycheck. "Helps me plan my work around your schedule. Avoid disruptions when you need focus." Kate had been reviewing something on her tablet, probably preparing for that crucial meeting. But she looked up at that, studying him with those dark eyes that still made his pulse quicken despite his best efforts at professional detachment. "Most people on my staff do the minimum required and nothing more. They show up, collect their paycheck, go home. Why don't you?" The question caught him completely off guard, personal in a way he hadn't expected. Marcus secured the new detector before answering, giving himself time to choose words carefully because honesty felt dangerous, but lies felt worse. "I have a daughter, Lily. She deserves better than minimum effort from me." He climbed down from the ladder, meeting Kate's eyes despite the risk. "This job, what you did for me, giving me this position, it changed our lives. Changed what's possible for us. Seemed like the least I could do was earn it every single day." Something flickered across Kate's face. Too quick to identify, but definitely there, recognition perhaps, or something else he couldn't name. "Your daughter. She's 6. "Yes, ma'am. Lily." The name felt intimate, somehow personal in a way that made him hesitate. But Kate was watching him expectantly, and refusing to continue would be more awkward than offering this small window into his life. "She's in 1st grade. Loves art class and hates math homework with a passion that seems excessive for someone so young. Wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up because she loves animals more than people, and honestly, I can't blame her for that." Kate was quiet for a moment, expression unreadable as always. "That must be difficult. Raising a child alone. It's everything." The truth came simple and complete, carrying 6 years of weight in 2 words. Then, because she'd opened the door to something more personal than they'd ever discussed. "What about you? Do you have?" He stopped, realizing too late he was crossing a line that probably shouldn't be crossed. But Kate smiled, and it transformed her face for just a second, a small, sad curve of her lips that made her look younger. More vulnerable, more human than the armor she usually wore. "No one. Building an empire doesn't leave much time for personal entanglements, and most people want something from me. Power connections, proximity to success. It becomes difficult to know what's real and what's performance." The honesty in her voice startled him. This was vulnerability offered freely without apparent calculation. Marcus didn't know what to do with it, how to respond to this glimpse behind the carefully maintained facade. "I can't imagine what that's like. Not being able to trust people's intentions." "Can't you?" Kate's eyes held his with intensity that made breathing difficult. You trusted your daughter's mother completely. She left you alone with a newborn. Now you raise Lily by yourself, working yourself to exhaustion to provide for her. I'd imagine trust is rather complicated for you too, Marcus. She was right, and the recognition settled between them like something physical taking up space. An understanding that neither had expected to find here in her office at 7:15 on a Monday morning while he stood on a ladder replacing a smoke detector like this was just another normal day. Both of them had learned that trust was expensive. Both of them had built walls to protect themselves from the cost of caring. Both of them were standing here right now having this conversation despite every logical reason to maintain professional distance. Sometimes the strongest walls are built by people who learn trust can destroy you. And sometimes in the space between one heartbeat and the next, those walls begin to show their first cracks. Small fissures that let light through that suggest maybe possibly the armor isn't as necessary as it once seemed. The day everything changed started ordinarily enough. Wednesday afternoon, 2 o'clock, 3 days before Sterling Technologies' largest product launch in company history. A revelation of new software that could redefine their entire market position. Marcus had volunteered to personally inspect every system in the main auditorium, a 1,500-seat space that featured staging sophisticated enough for major concerts and technology that made most theaters look primitive by comparison. Kate would present to investors, press, industry analysts, and the entire senior staff. Nothing could malfunction. Not the smallest glitch would be acceptable. The facilities team had done good preparatory work. Everything looked pristine, technology tested, and ready, lighting programmed to perfection. Marcus was about to leave, satisfied that his obsessive attention to detail had found nothing wrong when something made him look up at the main lighting rig one more time. Years of maintenance work had trained his eyes to spot things that weren't quite right, subtle misalignments, patterns that didn't match, shadows that fell wrong. One of the primary stage lights looked slightly off-center, its mounting bracket twisted at an angle that seemed unintentional. He found a ladder and climbed up to inspect it more closely. What he discovered made his blood run cold enough to freeze. The safety cable, the backup that prevented lights from falling even if the main mount failed, was frayed nearly through. Not from age or normal wear, but from what looked unmistakably like deliberate cutting. Someone had carefully sawed through most of the strands with a blade, leaving just enough intact that it wouldn't be immediately obvious to casual inspection, but would fail catastrophically under the right stress, or at the right moment. And the main mounting bolt securing the entire assembly was loose, turned back, several threads from proper tightness held in place by friction alone and nothing else. The light weighed 40 pounds of metal and glass. If it fell during the presentation directly onto the stage where Kate would be standing for 90 minutes while 300 people watched. This wasn't accident or careless maintenance. This was sabotage. Deliberate, calculated, designed to look like tragedy instead of murder. Working quickly, hands shaking despite his efforts at control. Marcus secured the mounting bolt properly with a torque wrench, tested the weight distribution to ensure it would hold. Replaced the safety cable entirely with new steel from his emergency supplies. Then he methodically checked every other light in the entire rig, heart sinking as he found 2 more with loosened bolts, not as extreme as the first, but enough to suggest this wasn't isolated. He secured them all, photographed everything, documented timestamps and exact conditions. By the time he finished, 90 minutes had passed and his shirt was soaked with sweat that had nothing to do with physical exertion and everything to do with what he'd discovered. The question burning in his mind was whether to report this immediately. Tell Amanda Security Law Enforcement. If this was deliberate sabotage targeting Kate, there were protocols, investigations, potential danger that extended far beyond a rigged light fixture. This was attempted murder disguised as technical failure. But he had no proof beyond professional judgment that could easily be questioned. The frayed cable could theoretically be explained as wear and improper maintenance. The loose bolts might be attributed to vibration or inadequate initial installation. And if he was wrong, if he raised alarms that led to investigations that found nothing, he'd look paranoid or attention-seeking. Worse, he'd put himself directly in Kate's line of sight in a way that violated everything she valued about him. She needed him to be invisible, to solve problems quietly, not to create drama and chaos over maybes and possibilities. Marcus made his decision. He documented everything meticulously with photos and notes on his tablet, secured all the systems to safety standards that exceeded requirements, made a reminder to check them again immediately before the presentation. Then he went back to the executive floor and tried to act like his heart wasn't racing with the knowledge that someone had tried to kill Kate Sterling. Friday afternoon arrived with building tension. 3:30. Amanda sent Marcus a message asking him to verify the video feeds in the auditorium one final time to personally ensure every system was operational. Marcus went back down, checked the lights again with obsessive thoroughness. Still secure, confirmed all technology was functional, tested backup systems, verified emergency protocols. People were already filling seats, press photographers set up cameras, junior staff claimed positions. The energy in the room built like a gathering electrical storm, anticipation crackling through conversations. Kate arrived at 3:55, flanked by Amanda and two senior executives Marcus recognized from morning briefings. She wore a deep blue suit that commanded attention without demanding it. Hair pulled back with severe elegance, expression calm and confident, despite what had to be massive pressure. Marcus watched from the shadows at the back of the auditorium as she took the stage, tested the microphone with professional efficiency, surveyed the growing crowd with the absolute control of someone who owned every room she entered simply by deciding to. Their eyes met across the distance. Kate's gaze held his for just a moment, something passing between them that might have been acknowledgement or might have been his imagination trying to find connection where none existed. Then she turned her attention to her notes, and Marcus forced himself to breathe normally. The presentation began. Kate spoke with authority that made people lean forward unconsciously, her voice carrying perfectly through the sound system he'd personally verified. She outlined the new product line with precision that made complex technology sound inevitable, fielded questions from journalists with sharp intelligence that made their inquiries seem almost naive, commanded the stage like she'd been born to it. Marcus stood near the lighting controls at the back of the auditorium, ostensibly monitoring systems but really watching not the presentation but the equipment. The stage lights held steady. The video screens displayed perfectly. Audio balanced flawlessly. Everything was working exactly as it should, and he started to relax despite himself. Maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe the damage he'd found really was just neglect and coincidence rather than malicious intent. Maybe. 3 minutes into the presentation, the light directly above center stage, the one he'd personally secured, shifted almost imperceptibly. Subtle, just a slight rotation on its mount that most people wouldn't notice. But Marcus saw it immediately because he'd been watching for exactly this. His blood turned to ice water in his veins. He looked up at the catwalk, the elevated walkway above the stage where lighting technicians made adjustments during setup. Saw movement in the shadows where there shouldn't be anyone. A figure doing something he couldn't quite make out from this distance, working on equipment that should have been locked down hours ago. Someone was up there right now, working on the lights, the ones he'd just secured, while Kate stood directly beneath them, unaware of danger gathering above her head like a sword suspended by a thread. The light shifted again, rotated further. Metal groaned softly, a sound Marcus heard over the presentation audio because he was listening for it. Expecting it, dreading it. Marcus moved before conscious thought could interfere, racing toward the stage access stairs. He had to get up there, had to stop whatever was happening, had to. But the stairs were on the opposite side of the auditorium, and Kate was directly under that light right now, still speaking with perfect composure, unaware that death was literally hanging above her. The light groaned again, rotated further, metal straining against compromised bolts that someone had just loosened despite everything Marcus had done to prevent exactly this. Marcus abandoned any pretense of stealth or invisibility. His boots pounded against the auditorium floor, drawing confused attention from the crowd. He saw security guards starting to move toward him, uncertain whether he was a threat. Saw Amanda's startled face turning in his direction. Saw Kate pause mid-sentence, her eyes finding him in the crowd with expression caught between confusion and nascent alarm. The words tore out of his throat, desperate and loud enough to cut through the sound system. "Get away from center stage, move now!" Kate froze. Years of absolute control kept her rooted to the spot, instinct and training warring with the urgent command from someone who had no authority to give orders. Confusion and authority warred on her face. The light above her groaned louder, metal straining against the final resistance of failing bolts. Marcus didn't have time to explain, didn't have time for anything except action. He launched himself onto the stage, grabbed Kate around the waist with both arms and threw both of them sideways with every ounce of strength he possessed. His shoulder would scream about this later, but that didn't matter now. They hit the stage floor hard enough that Marcus felt something in his ribs protest violently. He twisted at the last second to take the impact on his own body. Felt Kate pressed against him, her heart hammering so hard he could feel it through their clothes, her breath knocked out in a gasp. Half a second later, maybe less, 40 pounds of metal and glass and electrical components crashed into the exact spot where Kate had been standing. The mounting bracket finally gave way completely and the light exploded on impact, with a sound like a gunshot. Shattered glass sprayed across the stage in glittering shards. Sparks flew from severed electrical connections, brief fireworks in the auditorium lights. The crowd erupted in absolute chaos, screaming. People running for exits, security converging from every direction with weapons drawn. Confusion and terror spreading like contagion. But Marcus only registered Kate in his arms, her eyes wide with shock and something deeper, the recognition of mortality, the understanding of how close death had come. He ran his hands over her shoulders, her arms checking for injuries with fingers that shook despite his best efforts at control. "Are you hurt? Did any of the glass hit you?" "Kate, talk to me." Kate's voice came out shaky but trying desperately for control. "I'm fine. I'm not hurt. How did you know?" Security personnel surrounded them before he could answer, pulling them apart with professional force voices shouting questions and orders that Marcus barely processed. He caught a glimpse through the chaos of figures fleeing from the catwalk access, saw guards racing after them with weapons drawn and radios crackling. Amanda was there suddenly, her professional mask cracked completely with genuine terror, helping Kate to her feet with trembling hands. "Are you injured? Should I call paramedics?" "I'm fine." Kate said it louder now, authority returning to her voice even as her hands shook visibly. "Everyone calm down. We need to clear the auditorium in an orderly fashion. No panic. Security contain the situation." "On it." Cole Barrett, head of security, former detective, professionally competent, was already coordinating on his radio. Kate's eyes found Marcus again. He was still on the stage floor where security had left him. His shoulders screaming where he'd absorbed their combined impact, blood running from a cut on his arm where a glass shard had caught him. Scattered glass surrounded him like diamonds in stage lights. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing. Surface cut." "It's not nothing." She moved toward him, but Amanda intercepted gently, professionally. "We need to get you to a secure location until security can sweep the entire building and determine if there are additional threats. Please, Kate." For a moment, Marcus thought Kate would refuse, would insist on staying. But she let Amanda guide her toward the exit, looking back at him one last time with an expression he couldn't fully read. Shock and gratitude and something deeper that made his breath catch despite the pain and chaos. Then she was gone, and Marcus was surrounded by security personnel asking questions he barely heard, paramedics checking his injuries, his mind replaying those seconds on infinite loop. The weight of Kate in his arms, the absolute terror in her eyes, the certainty that if he'd been 1 second slower she would be dead, and he'd be living with that knowledge forever. And somewhere in the chaos surrounding him, Marcus realized that invisible was no longer an option. He'd thrown himself into the spotlight to save her life, and nothing between them could ever be the same. The security office on the second floor became command central within minutes. Marcus sat in a hard plastic chair while a paramedic cleaned and bandaged the gash on his forearm. The sting of antiseptic barely registered against the adrenaline still flooding his system. Around him, guards spoke in clipped professional tones into radios coordinating a building-wide lockdown while reviewing security footage on a wall of monitors. Cole Barrett pulled up a chair, his expression grave. "Walk me through what happened. Start with why you were checking the auditorium in the first place." Marcus explained everything. The morning briefing where Amanda mentioned the presentation, his decision to personally verify systems, finding the frayed safety cable and loose mounting bolts Wednesday afternoon, the photos time-stamped on his tablet showing the sabotage, how he'd secured everything but someone had interfered again during the presentation itself. Barrett studied the images with a jaw that kept getting tighter. "You fixed it, secured everything properly, so how did the light still fall?" "Someone was up in the catwalk during the presentation. I saw movement, saw them working on something. They must have loosened it again after I left or found another way to compromise the mount that I didn't anticipate." "Did you see a face, any identifying features?" "No, just a silhouette. Dark clothes, moving fast when they realized it was falling." Barrett's eyes narrowed with professional suspicion. "And you didn't report the initial sabotage to anyone?" It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway because what else could he do? "I considered it seriously, but I had no definitive proof it was deliberate, could have been explained as negligence or poor maintenance. I documented everything thoroughly, fixed the immediate danger plan to monitor it closely. I didn't expect someone to actively interfere during the event itself with 300 witnesses present." Barrett studied him for a long moment. "Your quick thinking saved Ms. Sterling's life. I want to be absolutely clear about that. But this situation is now a criminal investigation. Attempted murder in front of multiple witnesses, possibly corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit violence. You'll need to make a formal statement to law enforcement." "Whatever you need. I'll cooperate completely." The door opened and Amanda appeared, her usual composure restored but strain visible around her eyes and in the tight line of her mouth. "Mr. Hayes, Ms. Sterling wants to see you immediately." Barrett nodded. "We'll continue this shortly. Don't leave the building or the city without checking with me first." "Understood." Marcus followed Amanda through corridors now patrolled by additional security personnel, past employees gathered in worried clusters speculating about what had happened to the executive floor where the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Assistants spoke in hushed voices, senior executives behind closed doors having urgent discussions about crisis management. Amanda led him not to Kate's main office but to a smaller conference room he'd never entered before. Kate stood at the window with her back to the door, still in the blue suit, but with her hair down now, falling in waves across her shoulders in a way he'd never seen. She didn't turn when they entered. "Leave us." Her voice was quiet but carried absolute command. Amanda hesitated visibly. Kate's security protocols strongly suggest, "I'm safe with Marcus." Kate's voice softened slightly. "Leave us alone, Amanda. Please." The door closed with a click that seemed too loud in the silence that followed. Marcus stood just inside the room, unsure whether to speak or wait, his heart hammering against his ribs hard enough that he wondered if she could hear it. Kate finally turned, and the expression on her face stopped whatever words he might have found. Her eyes were red-rimmed tears recently wiped away. Her carefully maintained mask was completely gone, stripped away by a brush with mortality. This wasn't the Ice Queen. This wasn't the CEO who commanded boardrooms with ruthless efficiency. This was Kate, just Kate, confronting the reality that she'd been minutes from death. "You tackled me. In front of 300 people, you grabbed me and threw us both to the ground like I was a football and you were making the most important play of your life." "I'm sorry. I didn't have time to explain or ask permission, or don't apologize." Her voice broke slightly. "Don't you dare apologize. You saved my life. Do you understand that if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't seen that light shifting, if you hadn't acted without hesitation, I would be dead right now?" dead on that stage with everyone watching. The rawness in her voice hit him like a physical blow to the chest. I saw the sabotage Wednesday afternoon. The frayed cables, the loose bolts. I fixed it all, but I should have reported it immediately to security. Should have insisted they cancel the presentation until a full investigation. You did exactly what you should have done. Kate crossed the room, stopping 3 feet from him, close enough that he could see she was still trembling despite her efforts at controlling. You identified a threat others missed. You neutralized it using your expertise. You stayed vigilant when it would have been easier to assume the problem was solved. When the danger evolved in a way no one could have predicted, you acted without hesitation or regard for your own safety. That's not something to apologize for, Marcus. That's heroism. I'm just maintenance. I fix broken things. I'm not a hero. You're the man who saved my life twice now. Her eyes held his with intensity that made breathing difficult. Once from embarrassment and potential career damage when you could have exploited what you saw in my office, and today from actual murder. So don't stand here and tell me what you are or aren't. I know exactly what you are. The way she said his name like it meant something, like he meant something, rewired fundamental circuits in his chest. Marcus found himself taking a step closer, drawn by gravity he didn't fully understand. What happened up there on that stage wasn't about maintaining your corporate image or protecting the company's reputation. That was about you, just you as a person. And I would do it again right now without thinking twice if someone threatened you. Kate's breath caught audibly. For a moment, Marcus thought she might say something that would change everything between them, might acknowledge whatever was building in the space they occupied. But then her phone buzzed urgently, shattering the moment like glass, and she looked away. Security found evidence in the catwalk, tools sections of cut cable, proof of tampering. They're reviewing all footage from the building going back 72 hours. Whoever did this will be caught. Do you know why someone would target you like this? This wasn't random. This was planned. A bitter smile crossed Kate's face. I'm a young woman running a multi-billion-dollar company in an industry dominated by men who think they deserve what I have simply because they're male and older. I've made enemies acquiring competitors, refusing partnerships that would have enriched board members, choosing merit over politics. The list of people who'd benefit from my death is longer than I'd like to admit. The casual way she said it, like attempted murder was just another business consideration, made Marcus's hands curl into fists. That's not normal. That's not something you should have to live with. It's reality. Kate moved back to the window, putting distance between them. And now I have to decide how to handle it going forward. Cancel future public appearances, increase security to levels that make me look afraid. Show weakness to everyone watching and waiting for me to fail. You show strength by staying alive. Everything else is secondary to that. She looked at him then with something that might have been wonder. You really believe that? I know what it's like to have someone depending on you completely. To know that your choices and your survival determine their entire world. Marcus thought of Lily probably just getting home from school right now with Mrs. Walsh doing homework and completely unaware of how close she'd come to losing her father today. You have thousands of employees whose livelihoods depend on this company continuing to function. You owe it to them to protect yourself, even if it means looking cautious instead of fearless. Is that the only reason the employees and their livelihoods? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Marcus wasn't ready to examine in the light. Before he could answer, before he could decide whether honesty or deflection was safer. The door opened and Cole Barrett appeared with 2 other security personnel. Ms. Sterling, we have a significant development. We've identified the individual who was in the catwalk. Kate's spine straightened, authority flooding back into her posture like water filling a vessel. Show me everything. They moved to a larger conference room where security had established a command center with computers and monitors and the organized chaos of an active investigation. On the main screen, frozen footage showed a man in dark maintenance coveralls accessing the catwalk approximately 20 minutes before the presentation began. The image quality was good enough to see his face clearly, mid-30s, average build, completely unremarkable in every way except that he'd tried to commit murder. His employment records say his name is David Reeves. Barrett's voice was grim. He's been with our building maintenance contractor for 8 months. Background check at hiring was supposedly clean, references verified, all standard procedures followed. But we just discovered that his employment application used a false social security number. The identity is fabricated. Someone planted him here deliberately. Kate's voice was tight with controlled fury. That's our assessment. We're searching his assigned locker and workspace now, contacting federal authorities for assistance. But there's more you need to see. Barrett pulled up another image, a screenshot of an email from an anonymous account. This was sent to 3 business journalists 40 minutes ago before the incident occurred. It claims you've been cooking the books, inflating revenue numbers to artificially boost stock prices and deceive investors. The timing suggests whoever sent it expected you to be in no position to defend yourself or your company. Marcus felt physically sick. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was coordinated corporate destruction kill. Kate released damaging accusations, simultaneously tanked the company's value and reputation all at once in a carefully orchestrated attack. The allegations are completely false. Kate's voice was flat, containing rage that Marcus could see burning in her eyes. Our books are audited quarterly by independent firms with sterling reputations, but proving that to the market will take time and effort, and the accusation alone will damage investor confidence and stock price. Not if you're standing in front of cameras tomorrow morning, very much alive with security footage showing an attempted murder that coincides perfectly with fraudulent allegations designed to destroy your credibility. Barrett's tone carried professional certainty. That narrative isn't whistleblowing or legitimate corporate criticism. That's conspiracy and attempted murder, and it will be prosecuted as such. We need to find Reeves before he disappears completely. And I want to know who hired him, who planned this, who has the resources and motivation to orchestrate something this elaborate. We're already on it. In the meantime, I'm assigning personal protective details. You don't go anywhere without no. Kate's voice cut like steel. I'm not hiding behind visible bodyguards like I'm afraid of my own shadow. We handle this intelligently and strategically, but I will not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me cower. Barrett looked like he wanted to argue, but clearly knew better. At minimum, you need someone watching your immediate environment with expertise to identify threats. Someone you trust implicitly. Kate's eyes found Marcus across the room. Something passed between them in that look, a silent conversation that excluded everyone else present. Marcus stays close to me. He's already proven he can identify threats that trained security personnel miss. He works on the executive floor anyway, so nothing changes visibly to external observers, but he's present and vigilant. Ms. Sterling, with all respect, Mr. Hayes is maintenance staff, not trained security personnel with tactical experience. Mr. Hayes saved my life twice in the past week while your security personnel were watching cameras and patrolling hallways according to established patterns. Kate's tone brooked absolutely no argument. I trust his instincts and judgment. He stays close to me. Barrett nodded reluctantly. We'll need to brief him extensively on protocols, provide secure communication equipment, coordinate with our teams. Fine. Do it immediately. I want this handled tonight. Barrett turned to Marcus with an expression that was professionally unreadable. Unless you have objections to significantly expanding your responsibilities. Marcus thought about what he was being asked to accept. Thought about Lily and the risks of putting himself between Kate and whoever wanted her dead. Thought about walking away from this, choosing safety and stability, protecting the fragile life they'd built together. But when he looked at Kate, really looked at her, he saw vulnerability. She was hiding behind steel and authority. Saw someone who'd built walls so high she couldn't see over them anymore, who trusted so few people that asking him to stay close was an act of profound faith that terrified her even as she demanded it. No objections. Whatever you need me to do. The relief that flashed across Kate's face was so brief he almost missed it. But it had been there real and raw and human before she locked it away behind control again. The next 3 hours were an intensive crash course in personal security. Communication protocols, threat assessment, emergency procedures, coordination with Barrett's team. Marcus was fitted with a discreet earpiece connecting him to the security network, shown panic buttons and safe rooms he'd never known existed, given access codes that granted him entry to systems far beyond his normal clearance. Barrett walked him through basics with professional efficiency. Your job isn't to engage threats directly, you're not trained for that, and we don't want you trying. Your job is to get Ms. Sterling to safety immediately and alert us to respond. You see something suspicious, you call it in and we handle it. Crystal clear. Marcus understood, though privately he wondered what he'd actually do if someone threatened Kate directly in his presence. The tackle on stage had been pure instinct, and he strongly suspected his instincts wouldn't pause to consult security protocols. It was nearly 11 when he finally made it home. Mrs. Walsh had put Lily to bed hours ago, leaving a note about struggles with math homework and homemade soup in the refrigerator that she'd brought over because you both need proper nutrition, Marcus Hayes, not just pasta and canned sauce. Marcus stood in his daughter's doorway watching her sleep peacefully and felt the weight of everything pressing down on him like physical force. He'd crossed so many lines today, professional boundaries dissolved, class divisions ignored. The careful distance he'd maintained between himself and the world Kate inhabited had evaporated in seconds of crisis. And tomorrow he'd cross more lines, standing close to her. Not as invisible maintenance staff, but as something else entirely, protector confidant. The person she'd chosen to trust with her safety. When she trusted almost no one. His phone buzzed, a text message from Kate's private number to his personal cell. A number she shouldn't have, but apparently did. Thank you for today, for everything. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be complicated in ways neither of us can fully predict. Marcus stared at those words until his eyes blurred. She had his personal number, had reached out after hours like they were friends or something more, had thanked him like a person rather than an employee fulfilling job duties. He typed back carefully, choosing each word. You're welcome. See you at 7 tomorrow morning. Her response came immediately despite the late hour. 6:30 actually, we have significant work to do before the day officially starts. Marcus smiled despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the knowledge that his life had just become exponentially more complicated. Of course she wanted to start earlier than everyone else. Of course she had work that couldn't wait. 6:30, he confirmed. He fell asleep that night with his phone on the pillow beside him, half expecting it to buzz again with another message, another glimpse into Kate Sterling's carefully guarded inner world. It didn't. But somehow, knowing she was awake somewhere in the city, probably working through crisis management plans and security protocols, made him feel less alone in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring press conferences and investigations and the grinding machinery of law enforcement pursuing whoever had tried to kill her. Tomorrow would bring more questions than answers, more complications than solutions. But tonight they were both alive, both safe, both changed irrevocably by what had happened between them. And that would have to be enough.